Welcome to my book review of Bullets, Buzzards, Boxes of Pine by J.D. Hardin. This is the first Western book I've ever read. I found it at a yard sale for only 25 cents. So this is the first exposure to Western novels I've had. And on here it says, the most exciting writer since Louis L'Amour, according to Jake Logan. And if this is the most exciting writer since Louis L'Amour, there must not be much competition in the Western paperback novel literary space, because in my opinion this is the worst book I've read and reviewed on this YouTube channel. It's not very good, and it's about two Pinkerton Detective Agency detectives. The main character, the main protagonist, is named Raider, and no, he's not from Oakland. Raider is a former farmer from Arkansas, and his partner is Doc, who is a college graduate from New York. So a little bit of different upbringing, I suppose. And it's about, I think they have a series, but for these two detectives that this J.D. Hardin guy was writing. But in this book, it starts off, the first chapter starts off, and Raider, the main character, has an arrowhead stuck in his butt. That's how it starts off. So you know it's going to be a little rocky and it starts off, they're in a bar, and Doc is saying, you need to go see a doctor to get that arrowhead removed out of your butt. And then Raider's like, I don't need no doctor. It'll work itself out. And then, which led to, and this is like a couple pages in, I feel like this is a funny sentence. The period of inactivity, whether destined to be a few days or 2 weeks, could have been well spent removing Raider's acquisition, enabling the man to recover full use of his butt. That is just a sample of the great writing that is within J.D. Hardin's Bullets, Buzzards, and Boxes of Pine. And so you're wondering, what happened to the arrowhead in the main character's butt? And so it turns out Raider, after refusing to have the arrowhead removed, goes up above the bar into some room to hook up with a prostitute. And then while he's making love to this lady, his partner comes in, hits him in the head, puts some chloroform over his nose to knock him out, or chlorophyll, or whatever it's called, you know, and then he removes the arrowhead from his butt. So this is like the first chapter, and it doesn't get any better. Like, the story is just outlandish. I know it's a novel, it's not nonfiction, but oh my goodness, it stretches the imagination. Also, there are a couple parts that get a little raunchy with the details. But it does say an adult Western, which I didn't notice that when I was at the garage sale. There is quite a bit of liberal use of swear words in it. The main storyline in Bullets, Buzzards, and Boxes of Pine is that Doc and Raider are tasked with escorting 3 people from wherever they're at. I can't remember what town it was, like Denver to New Orleans, so they can leave. And these 3 people are royalty. They are, I have it marked in the back with their names. Let me see here. Give me a sec. Okay, so the 3 people that they're supposed to escort from the Rockies to the Gulf Coast, according to the back. The 3 people they are supposed to protect and escort from the Rockies to the Gulf Coast to New Orleans, so they get on a boat and leave the country, are Austria-Hungary's Crown Prince Rudolf, Hildegard Keck, and Baron Alois von Vogelfang. Now, if that isn't some made-up names, I don't know what is. Oh my goodness. And so when they're protecting them because there's this radical political group that is called the United Left, if I remember correctly, and they're out, and there's a rumor that they're going to try and kidnap the Crown Prince of Austria, Prince Rudolph, and these other two people will be, part of the deal since they're traveling with him. And Prince Rudolph is just out exploring America, enjoying the Wild West that there is. And so Doc basically rides ahead to the next town to make sure it's safe and there's no United Left plots to kidnap the Crown Prince, there once. So he's ahead, like one town ahead of them, right? And Raiders there to protect the people. And so they meet them, right? And Raider, he had pictures of who was supposed to be with him, but he didn't really look at him, because Raider's the kind of detective that thinks with the head in his pants, not the head on his shoulders. So he sees Hildegard Keck and he's like, "Ooh, man, that woman's got some big boobs." And so that's all he's worried about and thinking about, basically. And so he doesn't really pay attention to who they are. So it turns out that they're not the actual Crown Prince and the Hildegard Keck and the Baron von Vogelfang. They're actors portraying them. And the United Left had already hired some miscreants to kidnap them and do a switcheroo. And they had hired these actors. But, I mean, at first, he don't know that, right? And so, like I said, the story is not very good. And so they're riding along. This is before he knows that they're actors, and he thinks that they're actually the people they're supposed to protect. And there's a stagecoach on the road, and then the people on the stagecoach, they act like they're broke, like their stagecoach broke down, but they really are just, bandits. And so they rob them of their stuff. And Raider, he feels so embarrassed. He's like, "Oh, what am I going to do? I can't look Hildegard Keck in the eye because she's got such an icy stare. What can I do to help melt that icy stare?" And so then he decides, "I'm going to go get that stuff back, and then maybe Hildegard Keck will be interested in me." And so he goes in the night, and he sees this campfire, and he goes up there, and he's like, "I'm gonna get that stuff back." And then he starts hitting these people. Turns out, it wasn't even the people who stole from him. And so, I mean, this detective's not the best detective. And so then Raider, he keeps going, he finds a cave, and he actually finds the people who robbed him. He takes their stuff back, and then, he gets back, and then the Hildegard Keck woman's like, "Oh, you're so great," and then they have sex, because it's a stupid book. So after Raider has sex with Hildegard Keck, he finally begins to start thinking with the head on his shoulders, and he realizes that something isn't right. And then he gets Doc to come back from the town that he's ahead of them, to come back to where they're at, and Doc comes back and he's like, "There's something wrong, Doc, there's something wrong." And then he's like, "Well, there better be something wrong, because you made me come all the way here riding this horse all quick, And then they find out that the Baron, the Crown Prince, and Hildegard Keck, who was like the Baroness or something, I don't know, I forgot what word they used. But they're missing, they've vanished, and so they're trying to figure out where they went. Somehow, it's like they're the dumbest detectives, Doc and Raider, especially Raider. They even say that he's illiterate in the book. They're some of the dumbest detectives, but they just get dumb luck, So, because every place they go is where they need to go by accident, which is kind of another dumb thing about this book. I just wish it would be a little more realistic, like they actually had some sense that led them to the right place, but it's more like it's dumb luck. So they end up going to another town, and they see a play displayed, and they're like, "Oh, I saw that name on a playbill that Hildegard Keck woman had, and it was Nora Bates." So he goes there, and then he sees the woman, but she's dressed differently. She's got a different wig on, but Raider knew that it was the same woman who was portraying Hildegard Keck earlier from her bust size. He's a great detective. And so then it turns out the woman's name is Nora Bates, and they find the guy who was playing the Baron, and then later on they find the guy who was playing the Prince Rudolph guy. And so then throughout their other, I don't know exactly what happened, and I'm probably not saying in the right order, but they also found these two brothers who were the ones who, they killed some people. They killed the original guard for the actual Crown Prince and his people. And then they did the switcheroo with the actors, right? At some stable. And they find those two guys, the Taggart brothers. And, you know, instead of talking with them or whatever, they end up in a shootout and they end up killing both of them, right? They get a little bit of information from them, but not enough to really go on. And then they find out about this guy named Otis. And he was the intermediary between the United Left, the people who were basically funding the operation to kidnap the Crown Prince of Austria, Prince Rudolph. And so they find this Otis guy. Then they have the other Pinkerton detective agents come and help them. And they basically Raider, he gets taken as a hostage, basically, as a bargaining chip. And so he's stuck there in their little hideout. And then everyone else shows up. And they're supposed to, you know, hand over the three people, the three kidnappees. But it's really just the actors that they had hired to portray them. But they're hoping that the guy doesn't notice, right? And then Raider, he's trying to escape before, you know, all this goes down when they have this big shootout, basically. And what he does is pretty stupid because this guy's coming back to give him something to drink, right? He puts a bunch of oil cans up, and when he opens the door, they fall on the guy, and then he's like, oh, I got hit with some oil and some cans, and he's all dizzy, you know, and then Raider's able to knock him out and, you know, knock him out so he's not in his way. And so then Raider drags him out of the room that he was stuck in. But then Raider closes the door, and then he throws the oil on the door, and then he lights the fire, and then he looks out the window and he thinks, oh, well, that's a long jump to get up to the roof's hoist or whatever to try and get up on there. Well, it's like, why would you start the fire inside the room that you're trying to escape? Why wouldn't you go out the other way or something? It was stupid and dumb, and it's just, oh my goodness, this book, it wasn't very good. It's not good. Like, I don't know, man. Hopefully this isn't an example of the average Western. And yes, it's an old book. It was published in 1980, so, I mean, times were different back then, but still, it's not a very good book in my opinion. And then, so basically, the Otis guy that they were trying to find at that point in the story, he basically is like, I'm not leaving, you know, so he starts shooting, and then they have to shoot him and kill him, right? So he ain't no help. And then there's two other guys, and their names were Boyd and Bender, and then they ended up finding them because they found the one guy's, Bender's girlfriend or whatever, because she had this Austrian thing on there. So that's how they knew where to find this Boyd and Bender guy, because they followed the Bender guy back to where they were keeping the Crown Prince and Baron Vogelfang and Hildegard Keck. But when they get there, they get caught by the other guy, by Dole. I think his name was Dole. And so then they're, you know, kind of being held captive, held at gunpoint, I guess. And so then they realized that the people they had kidnapped had escaped the boat that they were keeping them on, right? And so the two dudes were mad because one guy went off to go have relations with some woman, and the other guy was doing whatever, but he wasn't there, and so they escaped. And so then they were going to shoot Raider, you know, first, and then they were going to shoot Doc. And he was like, you got to tell the count of three. And he's like, 1, 2. And then basically Prince Rudolph, you know, saved the day and grabbed him and took the gun. And then Doc ended up shooting the Bender guy and blew his head off, basically, blew half his brains out. And then the Dole guy, I think it was Dole, got beat up by Raider, and it sounded like he shoved his face in the mud until he quit breathing. But, I mean, this is a great story. And so, so the ironic thing about Bullett's Buzzards, and Boxes of Pine is that the people that Raider and Doc were supposed to save and escort were actually the people who saved them from certain death, because Raider and Doc are two of the worst detectives in Western literature. Okay, and then this is another expert that I thought was funny. And this was at the end of the book when they had just been saved, you know, in the aftermath of Prince Rudolph saving them. You mean, and this is Doc saying it. This is Doc speaking to Raider. You mean you actually told him an old man and a 16-year-old boy saved our hides? And then Raider replies, didn't they? I mean, Bender was so close to 3, I could already feel the bullet whack me in the face. Then Doc says, yeah, the trouble is it makes us look like idiots. Here we are, big, brave, professional operatives, Pinkerton's finest, with the tables turned on us by a couple of drifters, rescued by a boy, an old man, and a woman. We'd better start praying this doesn't get into the papers. Which is true. Like, the Raider guy especially, like, he was such an unlikable protagonist that I really didn't care what happened to him. And then at the end of the book, you know, they finally made it to New Orleans, and Prince Rudolph and Baron von Vogelfang and Hildegard Keck are on the boat headed back to Austria-Hungary. And Raider's waving by, and then one of their associates comes up and shows them the newspaper, and it says, Pinkerton detectives saved from jaws of death by visiting 16-year-old noble. So they did make it in the papers that they had to be saved by the person they were trying to save. So overall, J.D. Hardin's Bullets, Buzzards, Boxes of Pine is not very good. I paid 25 cents for it, and I felt like I paid 20 cents more than I should have. I would not recommend you read it. It's not very good. It's the worst book I've ever reviewed so far. What other things can I say about this book? I just really didn't like Raider. He was a terrible protagonist. I didn't like how he interacted with the female characters, the very few female characters that were in there. He seemed like the distillation of toxic masculinity. I would definitely say it's a don't read, in my opinion. J.D. Hardin's Bullets, Buzzards, and Boxes of Pine. It's not worth reading.